Aren't we lucky that we have learned how the folks in the medieval times were sizing down their jeans? Lucky us. And immediately, the issue I see is they're using jeans. So I predict there's going to be some bulk. I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of hope for this technique, but let's try it out. It appears that on the end, they started with a knot multiple times, so it gets nice and bulky, so it won't come through. I think that ought to be big enough. I simply start on the one end. Oh, this is going to get hard, especially with a thick needle. Oh, okay, I need to get one of those finger thingies. A thimble. I believe this is called a thimble. So that is the first thing that they don't talk about, is going through the thickness of the fabric. I think they had a pretty thin jean they were using. All right, and down. Okay. Okay, down and through. All right, this part's pretty straightforward. And then they did this in one go. Let me see if I can do it in one go as well. All right, there we go. All right, it's a little easier now that I'm not going through the seam allowance. And in a little bit again. Coming towards the end. Now it's time to tighten this all. Pull it tight. Come on. Come on. And down through to the other side to tie another knot. And look at that, I have tapered down the waistband of my pants. I mean, I guess maybe I could have pulled it a bit tighter. And if I did the threads a little bit closer, there'd be less peeking through. So I could definitely refine this technique and do it better. But as I suspected, there's bulking issues. In particular, by the waistband here where the waistband, the seam allowance, meets the actual pants themselves. Because if I look on the inside, like look at that, it's just a thick, bulbous bit of fabric here, which would be very uncomfortable pressing up against my waist throughout the day. I officially classify this one as a fail. 500 years ago, clothes were still expensive, and so everyone had very few items to wear, and so the seam allowance was much greater, so that the garments could be taken in and out as needed over the years, as opposed to today, where clothes are so cheap that we make the seam allowance just big enough for whatever the size of the garment is. Want to draft your own patterns from scratch? Why not check out one of my courses? I go into details and try to explain as much as I can along the way. Getting a bias binding is always a challenge to have it nice and even, so this technique looks rather helpful. But as I watch the video, what I'm seeing here that's not being shown is a whole lot of setup work. I'm going to start by drawing it out. I want my seam allowance to be 1/2 inch. But I need it to be a little bit bigger for the fold, so I'm going to add about 1/16 of an inch, essentially making the middle two 1/16 of an inch larger means there's room for these outside flaps to flip inwards. Fold the other side. Oh boy. So this is where the fold is going to be, where the fabric is going to get stitched. So I want to be just inside that fold. So essentially I need to line up my needle just inside of that. So let's say right there. Okay. I'm going to lay in my bias tape. Fold that over. Okay. doesn't work quite so well. It wants to fold out. Lay this in here. And then fold. See, this is the problem, is we need a crease here, and there isn't a crease, and so this folding isn't working so well. Oh boy, this is finicky. Okay. Okay, you know what? Let me just manually start it off. So I'm going to fold and fold. Lay that down. Lay that down. Lay down my fabric. Fold that one in. Fold it across. And why is it not folding across? Oh, because it's gotten thicker with the many things. Oof. Oh shoot, I didn't think this through. I need it underneath to start sewing. Okay, this is pinching my fabric too much. It's all snug under there. Come on. Look at this. I'm tugging on it. Pretty good, and it's not going anywhere. That is in there so snug. There's no way that's sliding. All right, let me reconfigure it here. I want to give this thing the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to follow the advice of one of my earlier videos, which says break everything down into small enough steps until it becomes manageable. So, with that in mind, I'm going to do just the bias tape first. Okay. Get that underneath there. All right, stitch down. Make sure this is folded nicely. See, look, it's just there's too much friction. There's too much friction, it's not moving. See, look, if I pull on it, the tape comes off before that comes out. New idea. I'm not going to fold it all the way closed because that's where the tension comes from. So if I do it just like this, okay, it's kind, no, but, okay, I gotta, oh, there we go. There we go. Nope, 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 please don't go underneath. I've got some silky satin slippery fabric here. Oh, 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 almost worked for a second there. Okay, it's working, it's working. The second part of the challenge that I'm realizing is trying to get the fabric to not shift in here and to slowly slide and become less seam allowance on one side and greater on the other side. Okay, let me try sliding in some fabric in between. Let's see what happens. Nope, nope, you have to stay here. You have to stay here. Okay, here we go, here we go. Although, now my seam allowance is completely goofed. Oh boy. Okay. So this technique works, but big old asterisks. The first challenge is that the fabric on the inside here, especially the center fold, it ends up getting pinched. It has to fit inside of there. Maybe if I made these end pieces a little shorter, it would cause less of a pinch there. Challenge number 2 is to keep the fabric nicely aligned as well, because as I move along, it ends up slipping and sliding and it twists a little bit, and then as it goes along, it sort of loses the seam allowance on one side or goes back in the opposite direction. But keeping it nice and straight on the inside here is definitely a skill set unto itself. And I did get it to work, but that looks pretty garbaggio, you know what I mean? Ay, ay, ay. Head on over to the old corn cob, or hit the join button right here on YouTube, and you'll get access to my group chat, exclusive content, and you could even get your name in this video. Well, the next one. Not this one, but you know what I mean. This video I've seen in numerous iterations, and I want to give it a genuine effort. I think it could possibly work, but I'm worried about the bulking and pinching in the corners there. Anyways, editing corn, let's get into it. I've pre-pressed my placket here, at 1 inch wide, and then I've done the placket opening at 3/4 of an inch wide, so that way I have 1/8 of an inch of seam allowance around the outside for which to sew this onto here. Lay down my placket. Lay down the garment side. Lay down the other side of the placket. Tuck that underneath. Right over top. Continue on. Make sure that it's like so. Okay, now from here, I believe I'm supposed to fold that down like that. And then this comes back like so. And becomes a triangle point. Look at that bulk there. Oh boy. This is going to present some challenges sewing. So this technique does work. Because it's so bulky and thick, I'm getting some puckering of the fabric here. It's rather messy on the inside looking here as well. Chances are likely maybe I'm doing something wrong, so I don't want to blame the technique. But definitely only works if both of these fabrics are super thin. I'm using what I would consider a medium weight to lightweight cotton here. So yes, this technique does work, but I think we got to put at least a medium-sized asterisk here. With this technique, we're combining all the steps of sewing a placket into 2. And in my experience, I tend to do it with at least 4, 5, 6 steps. That makes it more manageable. And the challenge with combining it into such few steps is that everything has to go perfectly, or else things are going to pucker and pull and pinch and not turn out the way we want them to. So, breaking everything down into a series of small manageable steps, theory still holds. Save 10% on your next sewing machine. Head on over to that URL and use the code CORN at checkout. I have always wanted to do embroidery, and this just so might happen to be the solution. It's certainly a cheaper way of doing it, just zigzag stitch without a presser foot. Something tells me that there's definitely a technique to be learned here though, because this, I imagine, can get messy freehanding. I don't actually have one of those embroidery rings to hold it tight, so I'm just going to have to do that myself by pulling. So take what I do here with a grain of salt. Let me hold it down under. So if I hold it, supposed to loop and catch, right? Why is it not looping and catching? Okay, so if I start it off with the presser foot, okay, and then I can take it off. I don't feel, interesting. Okay, well let me, hold it nice and tense. Oof. Why is my machine skipping? Okay, I gotta fix it some point. And I need to fix the timing on my machine because apparently it's skipping stitches. My machine is definitely not skipping stitches when I have the presser foot on. Okay, so it works fine if I have my presser foot on. Is it because this needs to be perfectly flat down? So the fabric has to be perfectly flat down, otherwise it starts skipping stitches. Interesting. Okay. Can confirm that this technique does work. It's quite messy though here as I was first getting going, and got a little bit better here. And interestingly, when I had the presser foot on and I just manually pulled it, it was actually the best result yet, and should definitely get one of those rings to hold it all nice in place, and making sure that the fabric is all the way down on the machine. With enough practice, this could be a method of embroidery. I want to be fair to these videos that I was using in that there's a good chance if I was next to the folks while they're making them, They could share all kinds of tips and tricks that I was unaware of, details that I didn't catch, and so on and so forth. And the reality is, these are short clips. There's way more being left out than is actually being shown for the sake of the brevity that is required on these platforms. Who knows what I'm missing? But I didn't find them very useful, so you decide. And if you want to, that's another one of my vidges that you can watch. So enjoy or subscribe.